Good evening, everyone. I am Utkarsh Punjabi, and welcome back to the Grass channel. Together, we make grass greater than chess. Okay, so our video today is going to be a part 2 of the defending India's second best chess player. His name is Vidit Gujrathi. If you haven't seen the first part, I would highly recommend you check out the first part before. So both parts that we're covering, the two games are from FIDE Online Nations Cup that took place recently. The 6 teams or 6 nations that participated in the events were Team India, Team USA, Team China, Team Russia, Team Europe, and Team Rest of the World. India ended up finishing 5th out of 6th. So they didn't do quite well, and some of the individual performances as well as just the overall team performance wasn't quite up to par. So the team consisted of course, Viswanathan Anand. He's the best player in India right now, even at the age of 50, just phenomenal. India's second best chess player, Vidit Gujrathi. You had Pentala Harikrishna, Adiban Bhaskaran, and between the 4 of them, they shared the first 3 boards, the top 3 boards, and the 2 ladies that participated were Humpy Kaneru and Harika Dronavali. Between the 2 of them, they shared board 4. And of course, Viswanathan Anand and the great Vladimir Kramnik. And for those of you that don't know, Vladimir Kramnik and Viswanathan Anand are genuinely great friends, and they were the co-captains of the Team India for this series, for this team event. So like I said, India didn't do quite well. And unfortunately, the person who ended up receiving most of the blame or most of the flack, the pushback, most of the mean-spirited criticism was Vidit Gujrathi. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first article. So the first article basically just talks about, as the title goes, India lose again as Vidit Gujrathi continues to fumble. It covers how Vidit had completely dominating positions in some of his games or completely drawn positions in some of the games, and he ended up losing them. So he didn't convert as well as he should have been converting. The second article, Vidit Gujrathi says, sorry to fans, China lifts Nations Cup. And here he basically talks about his match from round 3 against Levon Aronian and how it psychologically affected him, given the fact that he had such a winning position. And if he had converted that, it would have been a lot better for him, not just personally, but also for the team. And we definitely covered the round 3 matchup. We looked at an in-depth analysis of some of the great, beautiful positional setups that Vidit got, and hence we titled it 3 Heartbreaks in One Game. So today we're going to cover the round 8 matchup between the same 2 individuals, Levon Aronian and Vidit Gujrathi. The only difference here is that it is Vidit who has the white pieces this time. And I hope you understand that the intention behind covering the 2 games and trying to defend someone like Vidit Gujrathi, who's just 25 years old, and he's, like I said, he's, I think, 22nd ranked in the world. So he's ranked 22nd on the planet Earth right now out of billions of people that are alive. That is not a small achievement. And if that weren't enough, the fact that he has participated in 2 of Chess for Charity streams on Samay Raina's channel. For those of you that don't know Samay Raina, he's a brilliant comedian. He's an amazing streamer. And given the COVID-19 and coronavirus, of course, even though he's a comedian, he started streaming, and he's very passionate about chess. If you haven't seen some of his content, most definitely check it out. And please do ask if Goda is a respectable animal, as you will see why that's an important question while you watch his stream. So, anywho, we're getting sidetracked. So Vidit was an integral part in participating in both of the events. In the first event, Chess for Charity, they ended up raising 8.3 lakh rupees. And in the second event, I believe they ended up raising 4.5 lakh rupees. If that weren't enough, he's also the brand ambassador for blind chess in India. And the fact that this article is actually 2 years old. So the fact that he was only 23 years old 2 years ago, and he was the prominent leader in becoming an ambassador for blind chess, as blind chess hasn't received any real support or any real promoters or promotions. The fact that he's doing it outside of chess, off the board, just truly makes him an amazing person. So I hope that you guys realize that I'm not just being a homer and representing Indian chess, but also I wanted to do this because hopefully people who have provided the mean spirited criticism as well as unfair criticism without realizing a true, genuine chess aspect behind it, and just seeing that, you know what, the fact that he's getting into some of the positions, and he himself acknowledged, right, that he didn't have a great tournament. So let's go ahead and enjoy the game, and hopefully I can provide you some background knowledge and some in-depth analysis on the position, some of the visions, and some of the beautiful tactics that were displayed on the board from both Vidit Gujrathi and Levon Aronian. So let's dive into the game and let's see what happened. So this one is the round 8 matchup again. All right, so Vidit has the white pieces, Levon has the black pieces, and just keep in mind that throughout this tournament, it's a rapid tournament, and the rules were basically you get 15 minutes for the game plus 10-second increment after each move. And if you take 6 nations, the top 3 players from each nations, you get 18 players. Vidit, based on his rapid ranking, would be ranked about top 16th or top 17th. So a lot of times when he is going up against some of the players like Fabiano Caruana or Levon Aronian, these super GMs, he's actually spotting them 120, 140, sometimes even 180 ELO points. And when you get to that elite level, right, 2700, 2800 plus, that even 50 ELO point difference or 100 ELO point difference matters quite a bit. It's not the same as, say, if you had an 1100 ELO rating versus 1200 ELO rating. At the top level, a significant difference matters, or I should say, a little bit of difference, 2700 to 2800, even though it's 100 ELO points, same as 1100 to 1200, the 2700 to 2800 matters a lot more, just statistically speaking. So keep that in mind, and let's go ahead and check out this amazing game that was played in round 8. So Vidit opens with d4, as he is indeed a queen's pawn opening player, so he starts off with d4. Aronian responds with knight to f6. We have the Indian game on the board. Vidit responds with c4, and we c4 just gaining the control of the center, and Aronian now responds with e6. And with e6, we transition into the East Indian defense game of the Indian game. Vidit goes for knight to c3, and Aronian goes for bishop to b4, and now we have the Nimzo Indian defense. Just pinning the knight for the time being, and not allowing white to push e4 to gain a total control of the center. Because of course, if you push, the knight is currently pinned, and the knight will just go ahead and capture on e4. So I mean, this is a known opening theory. This has been played tens of thousands of times, if not hundreds of thousands of times. So this is a very popular known theory, actually. Okay, so we have after bishop to b4, Vidit responds with f3. f3 is quite an aggressive move. The common idea after bishop to b4 has been you want to play e3, just open up this diagonal for your light square bishop. In some cases, you may even think about pushing queen to c2. In some lines, you may even think about just playing bishop to g5. So by playing f3, Vidit is just going all out. He's saying that, look, this is probably the first time I've gotten white pieces in this tournament, and I'm going to make it count, and I'm going to show you why I am the 22nd best player in the world. So let's see what happens. Again, the idea behind f3 is that you want to get e4 in. So that will be a critical line. All right. So now we have d5 from Aronian, just challenging the center. A3, just asking Aronian, hey, what do you want to do with the bishop? And the most common continuation in this line, again, probably hundreds of thousands of games, would be bishop captures on c3, b captures on c3, and then you want to go ahead and exchange the pawns. So you will fix your pawn structure, and you will have a beautiful control of the center. But Aronian does not go for bishop captures on c3. Instead, he goes back bishop to e7. This is a known theory as well. This is not anything new. It's just it is played extremely rarely. So again, it's a rapid game. Why not try something new? So now Vidit goes for e4. Like we said, he is going all out this game. So after e4, we have d captures on e4, f captures on e4, and c5 challenging the center. After f captures on e4, the most common continuation that you would see is e5. The idea behind e5 is that you're opening up this bishop's diagonal, as well as once the capture takes place, you can go ahead and develop this bishop on c5. So again, the most common continuation could be e5, and then of course white doesn't want any captures or anything in the center. White wants to completely dominate the center. That's why you played f3 to begin with, but now you get bishop to c5. And of course the next move, you're most likely going to go ahead and bring your bishop to g4, and you'll keep your eye, or you'll keep your bishop on this diagonal for the time being. So that's the most likely continuation. However, like we said, Levon goes for c5. So after c5, again, you don't want any captures. So you get d5, and after d5, you have e captures on d5, e captures on d5, and castles. Okay, so we are 9 moves in. Let's go ahead and evaluate what's happening right now. Like we said, Vidit is playing aggressively in this game. By playing aggressively, he has beautiful control of the center, as you can see right there. But by getting to dominate the center, what has he given up? Well, he has given up development in terms of developing his bishop, his knight, as well as the castle. So if you put this in an engine, most likely it would probably spit out that it's an even game with white having slight advantage. This is played lots of times, so and Vidit himself is a d4 player, queen's pawn opening player, so this is not anything new. So okay, after castles we get bishop to e2. Now your idea is, of course, you don't want bishop coming to g4 and just harassing. So before you develop your knight and castle, the idea is, you know what, I'll go ahead and bring out my bishop first. I'll keep an eye on the f3 square, develop my knight, and then castle. So bishop to e2, a perfect move. Now we get rook to e8. Rook to e8, just basically targeting the semi-open e file, given the fact that the white center, white's king is still in the center. So beautiful counterplay from both Vidit and Levon. And again, they know their opening theory. You don't have to doubt them on their opening theories. You get knight to f3, just going for the castles. You have bishop to g4, like we said, this is a known line, and we have castle from white. And now Aronian goes for knight to d7, the only piece that wasn't developed. So from Black's perspective, the development is most certainly complete. Even though Black's bishop isn't out truly developed per se, but Black's bishop already has the beautiful diagonal. And in most of the lines, especially in Nimzo-Indian, your black bishop just stays back on the first rank and just targets everything. And depending on how the game flows, you can take that dark square bishop and develop it anywhere you wish. Okay, so d6. All right. What is the idea behind d6? So there is one game in the database where d6 was played, and that game is from Fabiano Caruana's game against Kirill Alexenko, and that was actually played very recently. Fabi played this line in the Candidates Tournament in March 2020, so just 2 months ago, before, of course, the whole stay-at-home order, quarantining, and so forth, so on happened. And Fabi found this beautiful, beautiful idea. And I follow one simple rule in life, in my chess life. If it is good for Fabi, then it's good for me. And it clearly seems like Vidit is following the same idea. And again, there's a reason why Fabi is known as the machine, right? The fact that he is such a principled player, right? He follows the rules, he follows the position complexities, and again, Fabi is the second best player in the world, and there's a reason behind that. So again, if it's good for Fabi, it's good for me. So the long-term idea for you, well, first of all, your first idea is that you have just developed d6 and you're just aggressively going after the center. This black bishop only has one square left, which is that, f8. Also, you want to go ahead and get this knight over to d5. But, and this is the beauty of chess, you don't want to just play it in one move. You want to go ahead and drop some incredible fireworks before you get there. And we'll see that in this game as well as we saw it in Fabi's game. So let's go ahead and continue the game. So d6, very aggressive move. Fabi is the one who brought the novelty to this position, and Vidit is exploiting the novelty to his amazing preparation. So d6, we have bishop to f8, like we said, the only square available, and now you're dominating these two squares. And the positional advantage you have is quite significant right now. So, okay, after bishop to f8, you get h3, just asking, hey, what do you want to do, Levon? Do you want to keep this knight? Do you want to exchange on f3? And by exchanging on f3, do you want me to get a hold of this beautiful diagonal as well? So Levon says, no, I'm just going to move my bishop back, but I'm going to keep the pin for the time being. Now you get knight to b5. Like we said, you want to get to d5, but the way you get to d5 is through creating a lots of fireworks. So of course, as you can all see, right, the goal is you're going from knight c3 to b5, b5 to c7, and from c7 you will eventually come to d5. And of course, your next move, if you play knight to c7, if black is uncareful, you're forking both rooks, the rook on a8 as well as e8. Okay, and like we said, this is a known game between Fabi and Alexenko, and in that game, Alexenko had played a prophylactic move like rook to e6. Rook to e6, just attacking the pawn because the pawn is not currently defended by anything. So Fabi said, you know what, that's not a problem for me. I'll just go ahead and develop my bishop and play bishop to f4 and guard the pawn. But now you have a6 attacking the knight. You still get knight to c7, and you still have the double fork. But there's a clever move from black, and that clever move is rook to e4, just attacking the bishop. And you don't want to go ahead and exchange your bishop and knight for a rook, because it's just a positional advantage for black, given the fact that how dominant your both of your pieces are, and of course then the pawn would fall as well. So Fabi played bishop to h2, and now we get rook to c8. After rook to c8, we had g4 in that game, and the problem here is that this knight is currently controlling d4 as well as e5. And in this position, Alexenko continued with bishop captures on g4 with the bishop sacrifice. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. So you're giving up your bishop, which is worth 3 points, for 2 pawns. Pawns are worth a point each. So 3 points to 2 points. You're only down by 1 point, a pawn. But you will get a lot of counterplay. Instead of setting yourself in a passive position and just getting a grinded out, slow, painful death, this was a perfectly normal idea. And Engine agrees with it. So in that game, you had bishop captures on g4, h captures on g4, knight captures on g4, bishop to d3, attacking the rook, knight captures on h2. You don't have to worry about it because you're attacking the rook as well. And now you go into a mini capture fest. So knight captures on h2, bishop captures on e4, knight captures on f1, queen captures on f1, bishop captures on d6, and knight to d5. And that game continued. Both white and black had positional advantage, but Fabi just grinded out to a beautiful, beautiful game, as he is known as the machine, such as the result and experience you would expect from someone like Fabiano Caruana. And I think if you put this in an engine, right, the engine would probably give 0.5 advantage in the favor of white. So it's not a lot. So the fact that a technical master like Fabiano Caruana can convert this position at a 0.5 is truly amazing. And the reason why I wanted to show you this kind of extended line of that game is because you'll be seeing a lot of the same principles deployed by Vidit Gujrathi. And just doing a proper justice to Vidit, who himself is a really good technical player, right? And he has played thousands of Queen's Pawn opening games. So this line is not anything new to him. So, okay, back to our game. So after knight to b5, Levon proposed a novelty to this position, and he played a very prophylactic move, rook to b8. And it is as of move 15, we have a completely new game on our hand. So again, the permutation that we saw, the line that we saw from Fabi and Alexenko, that's the same exact line, just through different variations, just through different logical structure, you will see it play out in this game as well. So after rook to b8, you get bishop to f4, just playing a beautiful move and saying that, you know what, look, I'm still going to go ahead and defend that pawn. Now a6, attacking the knight, knight to c7, attacking the rook on e8, and now rook to e4, attacking the undefended bishop. You get bishop to g3. So the difference here is that Fabi had brought his bishop all the way back to h2, and then of course pushed g4. What Vidit is saying that, you know what, I'm going to propose a different novelty. I'm not even going to give you a chance, a positional chance, to a creative player like Levon Aronian to go ahead and capture, and capture, right? I don't want my king's position to be opened up. So it makes a lot of sense that not only are you attacking, but you're playing a dual purpose move, or in this case, triple purpose move. So beautiful, beautiful play by Vidit. Okay, so after bishop to g3, you get bishop captures on f3. Let's take a moment. Like we said, Levon is a very creative thinker and a creative attacker. From positional dominance perspective, you want your pieces to be activated. You need to go ahead and activate your pieces so you can have some counterplay, right? And right now, this knight is guarding two critical squares, and we have already seen these two critical squares. One is d4, the other is c5. Ideally, you want to get your rook to d4, and in some lines you want to develop your knight to e5, so you can start controlling center as well as you can have some attacking chances. But the only piece that's currently bothering you is this knight. And on top of that, this bishop is not doing anything. It is such a sad bishop with absolutely no future to speak of. So Levon plays a beautiful move. Bishop captures on f3, bishop captures on f3, and again, you are attacking the rook. Here, I will say, some of you may be thinking about like, hey, why can't I capture with the rook? So capturing with the rook is not a precise play. The reason being is that after rook captures on f3, like we said, this rook wants to come to the d file. So you get rook to d4, attacking the queen. So you will almost be forced to play rook to d3, just doubling up on the d file. It's a beautiful positional play. But now you get knight to e4. And knight to e4 is a tremendous move, right? Just look at what it's doing. First, it's attacking the bishop on g3, which is undefended right now. And it's attacking the pawn on d6. So on top of that, it's supporting the c5, and you don't have a lot of counterattack to go ahead and capture that knight. So the way you will have to play is to get rook captures on d4, c captures on d4, bishop to h2, like we said, it's a monster bishop, you want to keep it. But now bishop captures on d6, bishop captures on d6, the only move out there, knight captures on d6, and knight to d5. So from the position that you had before to now, you have sacrificed all the positional advantage that you had, right? You just went into a massive capture fest and you geared it towards a draw rather than a double-edged position. A double-edged position in this case would be only white can push for a win, and if at worst, white can easily go for a draw. So a rook captures on f3, even though it may look enticing and saying that, hey, I want to go ahead and get this file for my rook. And the fact that I'm getting it on the third rank is even better. But that is not the way you want to continue. So you get bishop captures on f3, and now you are eyeing this beautiful diagonal. And in some lines, if black isn't careful, you can even sacrifice your bishop, and you can get a double action, say potentially going from here to there, right? So, sorry, there. So, again, chess is a beautiful game because as long as you have a good coordination, good relationship between all your pieces, where they're placed, how they're communicating in terms of on the attack, on the offense as well as the defense, you'll be fine. But figuring that out, well, good luck. So you get bishop captures on f3, beautiful move by Vidit, and now you have rook to d4. I hope none of you were thinking about after bishop captures on f3. I hope none of you were saying that, hey, Utkarsh, that's a free pawn. Why aren't you letting me capture that free pawn? Well, let's check it out. So if you were trying to be greedy and go for that pawn, you would end up in a very bad position. Let's see why. You get queen to b3. Now you have put queen and rook in a beautiful position, right? Just look at that. Look at that semi-triangle, kind of triangle. And you're attacking the rook, which is currently undefended. The only square that the rook has now is d4. This square is not available, 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 and that square is not available. And of course, you're not going to retreat anywhere here. So the only move you have available would be rook to d4. But now you allow white to develop the only piece that wasn't a part of the game. And you're basically allowing white to do this without wasting any tempo whatsoever. So you get rook a to d1, attacking the rook, and now, c4, attacking the queen, queen to e3, and in this position, if you don't want to just go into a massive piece loss, the only good continuous move for you is to sacrifice your rook for a counterplay. So the continuation, and the only continuation that engine prefers in this position, is bishop captures on d6, queen captures on d4, bishop captures on g3, knight back to d5. Like we said, you want to bring that knight back to d5. And of course, it was attacked as well. Queen to e8, getting the queen on the open file, and now queen captures on c4. So in terms of the point system, a rook is worth 5 points, a bishop is worth 3 points, and you grabbed a pawn for a pawn. But the difference in this case is you grabbed a massive and expensive pawn that was sitting on d6 and just blocking any development. So, of course, white would be favored in this position, but if you hadn't foregone your rook, you would be in a worse position. So this is still completely dominating by from white's perspective. So again, after bishop captures on f3, do not be greedy and go for that pawn. So indeed, Levon goes for rook to d4, and Vidit responds with queen to e1, just connecting the bishop and the queen. And now if any exchange were to take place, especially on g3, you can capture with your queen, and your queen will be placed beautifully on the king side. And that's a nice diagonal to have as well. So queen to e1, you get bishop captures on d6. You don't want to give up that knight. You can afford to give up your bishop pair, bishop for a bishop, but you want to bring that knight back. So you get knight to d5, bishop captures on g3, and like we said, queen captures on g3. So this is how the game continued, and we are on to move 22. And I hope you realize that I haven't mentioned a time clock once in this video. Like we talked about in our previous video in part 1, in round 1 against Fabiano Caruana, Vidit had a great position. It was Fabi had a bishop pair against bishop and a knight for Vidit, but Vidit got into an extremely time crunch, and he ended up making a terrible, imprecise play. It wasn't a blunder. A blunder is just like you couldn't have seen that. You had a brain fart, right? He played an imprecise move there. And the same thing kind of happened against Levon. Towards the end of the game, he had a completely drawn position, same as the game against Fabi, and he was under time pressure, and he just had a totally brain fart moment, and he ended up losing both of the games. However, in this game, we're on move 22nd, and Vidit has 26 minutes and 14 seconds on the clock. We started with 25 minutes on the clock, But the fact that he has just blitzed out all of the moves, right? 22 moves as part of his preparation following Fabi's game is mind-blowing. Levon, on the other hand, I think Levon had 21 minutes and 31 seconds on the clock. So Vidit is the one who had a 5-minute advantage on the clock. So beautiful, beautiful play. And now Levon plays a good defensive move, a good prophylactic move, and says, hey, let me go ahead and get my king off of any funny diagonals, any funny lines, and let me just go ahead and get my king to h8. And Aronian, Levon actually spent about 2 minutes 49 seconds before he played king to h8, and after the 22nd move from both players, it is Vidit who's up by 7 minutes and 22 seconds on the clock. So Vidit could not have asked for a better start. White, he got the white pieces. He went into an aggressive play. He was in his preparation. He got to dictate the board. And on top of that, probably for the first time in this tournament, after 20 moves, 22 moves, he has a 7.5-minute advantage on the clock. So a great start. Okay, so after king to h8, Vidit played rook to d1, rook a to d1. Engine does prefer rook to e1 slightly more. And again, that just goes back to the old principle, right? Whenever you see an open file, just go ahead and get your rook on the open file. And the way the game would have continued here would be, of course, rook to e1, knight captures on d5. Like we said, that's a beautiful knight. You need to get rid of it. Bishop captures on d5, so this pawn is still defended. You don't need to worry about it. And now white would have to be, black would have to be extremely careful and play f6. Here, after bishop captures on d5, if you think about like, hey, let me just go ahead and get the other knight in place of f6 so I can get my knight involved, I can open up my queen's influence, it would be a bad play. So let's check it out. So if you get knight to f6, you get rook to e7. This rook on the 7th rank is going to cause havoc. I hope none of you are thinking about taking that rook, because if you were, that's a bad idea. So let's say if you get queen captures on e7, oh, that's a free rook, right? No. You get queen captures on b8 with a check. You get queen to e8, the only move if you don't want to get checkmated. Queen captures on e8, knight captures on e8, and rook captures on f7. And you are just slowly but steadily going to gobble up all the pawns. And for the time being, I don't know if this knight has any good future for at least good 2-3 moves, right? So the fact that white would just dominate. So after king to h8, Vidit instantly play rook to d1, which conceptually makes sense, right? That you want to go ahead and get rid of this rook, especially from the d file, and by doing so, you'll go ahead and capture the pawn as well, and you can go ahead and dominate the center and then gear your attack towards either the center or the king side. So it's a very principled move, but rook to e1 would have been better. So after rook to d1, Aronian spends additional 3 minutes and 36 seconds here and plays queen to f8. And now Vidit has 10.5 minutes on the clock. What are some of the other candidate moves, right, that you might ask after rook to d1? Well, some of the other candidate moves we have already looked at. Knight captures on d5, bishop captures on d5, and importantly, f6. After f6, given the fact that the rook is not on e1, it can't come to e7, but you will see rook captures on d4, c captures on d4, rook to d1, just swapping the rook, knight to e5, and rook captures on d4. And again, that's a beautiful outpost for a knight, right? It's on a dark square. Let me go ahead and color it differently. It's on a dark square, and there's nothing you can do to dislodge that knight. And that knight is actually controlling a lot of. This knight is controlling a lot of real estate. So that is indeed a beautiful knight. And as they say, right, once the bishop pair is exchanged, if you can get your knight on the opposite color of your opponent's bishop, and it is just an outpost where the only way to dislodge that knight would be to give up your rook or queen potentially, or just go after the pawn, the base structure would be quite nice. So Engine says that this is a dead drawn position. So the other candidate move after rook to d1 for Aronian could have been rook to c8, just getting yourself on the c file, as the c file will indeed open up soon. Rook captures on d4, c captures on d4, knight captures on f6, the other knight takes its pawn, bishop captures on b7, rook to b8, and now you can just go ahead and go into a capture fetch, right? Or you can just bring it back here, you can bring it back here. You can even have some ideas afterwards of getting your queen on c7 if this queen moves. So there's a lot of counterplay from both positions, and the engine does indeed say that this is a drawn position. It's not a dead drawn, but if you ask me who would I prefer in this position, it would certainly be white, especially on the board over human chess. So after rook to d1, like we said, Aronian spent 10.5 minutes and played queen to f8. Sorry, not 10.5 minutes, 3.5 minutes. And the time difference between the two, between Vidit and Aronian, is in favor of Vidit by 10.5 minutes. Okay, so the reason why you played rook a to d1 is to go after the d file, and that is indeed what happens. So Vidit continues. However, he spends 7 minutes and 8 seconds here. And now the time difference between the two is down to 3.5 minutes. Before playing rook captures on d4, you get c captures on d4. You have b4. b4 is actually an excellent move. Why is that an excellent move? Well, okay, so b4, by playing b4, you're guarding c5. You're guarding c5 against the knight as well as the queen, right? So b4 is such an excellent positional understanding of the game that Vidit displays here. What could have been the other candidate move? Like I like to say, right, it's not good enough to think about an okay move or a good move. When you get to that level, you have to start thinking about a candidate move. Candidate move as in the best move possible in the position that will be a double edge or a counterplay position, that there'll be a dual purpose or triple purpose move. So after c captures on d4, the other idea you could have had, like we have shown in some of the other lines, you can go for knight captures on f6, knight captures on f6. Now, rook to d1, like we said, the d file is extremely important right now. You get rook to d8, but now queen to e5, just piling up on that pawn. You get b6. b6 is a very nice move. The reason behind that is, as you can see, white only has a light square bishop. Let me color that in a different, green is better. Okay, so white only has a light square bishop, and you can already see that this pawn is already lost. So if you go into an endgame, if you go ahead and go into a capture fest, you want to make sure that your pawns on the other side of the board, where it's hard for your king to get to, are on dark square. So white will not have a good enough counterplay, because why are the bishops better than knights in the endgame? Because they can attack in both ways, right? Both diagonals. And again, that's just a good positional understanding of the game. So again, this is just, I'm just showing you one of the variation how the game could have continued. So b6, you get rook captures on d4, and a5, getting your other pawn on the dark square. You get rook captures on d8, you get queen captures on d8, and now b4. But black actually prepared for it, so you get a captures on b4, a captures on b4, and the game continues. So this is just another way you could have continued the game. You definitely have an advantage here, right? 2-1. Your pawns are a lot more advanced. Your pawns are a lot more advanced. Your your king is at least one tempi up because it's going to be a while for this king to develop. And like we have already said, bishops are better than knights in the end game. So, okay. So after c captures on d4, Vidit goes for b4. Just a beautiful, beautiful counterplay by him. So you have, after b4, Aronian plays knight captures on d5, bishop captures on d5, targeting that pawn right there. And now knight to f6. Vidit spends 4 minutes and 24 seconds, and unfortunately, he plays queen to e5. I feel like queen to e5 is a slightly imprecise play. Also, after playing queen to e5, Vidit has 14 and a half minutes on the clock, and Aronian has 15 and a half minutes. So it is Aronian who's up by a minute now. So what could have been the best continuation after knight to f6? I think the best continuation could have been just bringing the bishop back to f3, as I've said throughout the game and as the basic chess principle goes, keep your bishops for the end games. So bishop to f3, you get b6, getting your pawn on the dark square, but now rook to d1, rook to d8, queen to c7, because queen is no longer there, and the game continues. And now you'll actually have a lot of counterplay here. And in some of the lines, if you want to go ahead and get your bishop involved, you can most certainly do so. But the fact that you already have a queen on the 7th rank, that's going to cause a lot of havoc. So I think the best continuation would have been keeping the bishop, bringing the bishop back. But instead, after knight to f6, Vidit says, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and get that pawn, and if you want to capture my bishop, I'll go ahead and capture it with my pawn, and I'm going to go ahead and slowly march up the board. So not a bad idea, makes a perfect sense. The other play could have been better. Okay, so you do indeed get knight captures on d5. Levon spends about 1 minute and 14 seconds, and they both have about 14 and a half minutes on the clock now. You have c captures on d5, like we said. You want to, if possible, you want to get a runner. So c captures on d5. Here you could actually think about, right, knight captures on d5. You could think about queen captures on d5. That looks enticing as well. Why does that look enticing? I'm sure you can all see it. You can't guard both pawns, right? So you get queen captures on d5, rook to d8, attacking the queen, defending the pawn, but now queen captures on b7, d3, thinking you can just go ahead and start pushing, but no, you can't. Rook to d1, queen to e8, going for some funny ideas on e2, e1, but white will just play queen to f3 and everything is fine. So in this game, or in this position, I should say, you have 3, 4, 5 pawns versus 5 pawns, but this pawn is most likely going to fall pretty darn soon. You have an active position, and on top of that, there's no way this pawn is going to survive, right? So positional understanding of the game, right? So After knight captures on d5, you could most certainly capture it with a queen. There's nothing wrong with that. But in a rapid game, especially with 15 minutes each, you don't want to make the game too complicated. You want to simplify the game. So, okay, you get c captures on d5, f6, like we have said, that f6 move is quite important. You get queen captures on d4, rook to d8, attacking the queen, and sorry, not attacking the queen, getting on the d file and attacking the pawn, and now rook to e1. Again, rook to e1 is slightly imprecise. The way you want to play it, and this is a good lesson for all the chess beginners, all the chess amateur, or just players who have been playing it for a few years and are anywhere between, I don't know, less than 1800 in rating or 1600 in rating. Anytime you go into a queen and a rook endgame, the first thing you want to do is get your rook behind the pawn. Why is getting your rook behind the pawn important? Well, first of all, if black decides not to gang up on the pawn, instead of queen guarding the pawn, you can have a rook guarding the pawn, and now this queen just becomes a monster piece because it can go diagonally and start attacking in all directions, right? You can start thinking about going after the pawns. You can start thinking about improving your position. So rook to d1 would have been a more bookish position, playing by the book. As you can tell, I'm a nerd, so playing by the book is slightly important. So after rook to d8, you get rook to e1. And now Aronian plays h6. h6 is such a head-scratching move. So this is the first imprecise play from either black or white. And the right idea here should have been just queen to d6, right? Just pile up right here. And if white decides to play rook to d1, it's actually wasting a tempo, right? And on top of that, this pawn can't advance, right? It's just being blocked. So are we just going into a Cold War position where no one is making any advancements and we could just offer each other a draw? As draw would be the most likely outcome here. Or what's your plan, right? But the fact that you have gained at least one tempo in this position for black, that would have been crucial. So you can't blame Aronian for playing a move like this, right? Because here you don't want to get checkmated on the back rank. That's the worst thing that could happen. So in principle, it makes sense, but not in this position. And I mean, this is what happens when you try to defend a bad move. So okay, 8-6, and Vidit does indeed capitalize and play the best move, play an excellent move. Rook to e6. Now you have queen to f7, but now queen to e4, just defending the rook. Your next move is just going to be pushing the pawn, and everything will be fine. Okay, so after queen to e4, you get queen to c7, with the idea of starting to harass your king. And also, if you can get yourself on the c1 square, you may have, in some lines, you may start thinking about like, hey, can I go ahead and be slightly greedy and capture the two pawns? I don't think you would have enough time, but okay. So Vidit says, you know what, look, I'm not going to let you have any funny tricks, and he just plays a4. a4 is an excellent move. There's nothing wrong with a4. Vidit actually spent about 6 minutes here calculating, should he play a4, should he play d6, and let's actually go ahead and check out what's the difference behind d6. Well, is d6 playable? So let's see if you get d6. Okay, so you get queen, and of course you can't capture, right? I hope none of you are thinking about capturing, because white wouldn't even think about your queen. It would just go for checkmate ideas. So, okay, you get queen to c1 with a check, like we said, and king to h2. Now, the first thing that you have to think of is that this queen cannot retreat to the c7 square, and there are no more checks along this diagonal. On top of that, if you go ahead and go for my pawns, my rook and queen are perfectly placed. So this would be quite dangerous for black. And this would be quite favorable for white. But Vidit just says, hey, look, we have equalish time on our hand. I don't want to go ahead and calculate too much, even though he did spend 6 minutes. I want to go ahead and simplify my position and just play through a dominant positional advantage. And that's indeed what a4 does. So a4 also a very, very good move. And after a4, you get king to g8. The idea behind king to g8 is if you can get your rook to f8, if you had a free tempo per se, that would be a lot better, because then you can start blocking anything along the 4 squares right there. Okay, so after king to g8, you have rook to e7. Excellent move by Vidit. Attacking the queen, just asking, hey, what do you want to do? But now you get queen to b6 with a check. You have king to h1. There are no more checks left. Queen to d6 and a5. I thought here you could have just taken the b7 pawn and gone into an exchange fast, because again, there's no way you're going to be able to defend the d6 pawn. So I thought, well, first let's go ahead and check out what happens if you capture, right? So rook captures on b7, queen captures on d5, queen to e7. Now you have some funny ideas right there of a checkmate, but of course, black has a counter. The counter would be queen to d1 with a check, king goes to h2, the only square available, and now queen to d6 with a check, and now you have to give up your queen. So queen captures on d6, rook captures on d6, and king to g3. And positionally speaking, like we have said, it is extremely important. If you get into an endgame, let's go ahead and evaluate this. My rook is causing a lot of havoc against, especially on the 7th rank. You can't really develop and bring your king into the game. So I'm handicapping you in a way. On top of that, I have a 2-to-1 advantage on the king side, right? And my pawns are far more advanced compared to your pawns. So this would be completely winning for Vidit. Again, it's a tough game, and on top of that, the fact that your your king has 2 tempi in advancement. You have an advantage by 2 tempi, especially in the king's positioning. So you could have certainly gone for this, and this would have been good. The other idea you could consider after queen to d6 is, okay, well, why can't I just play rook to e6, right? And if black decides to capture here, it would be really bad, right? So if you decide queen captures on d5, I hope none of you are thinking about that, because you immediately get rook to e8 with a check. I hope you're not thinking about capturing the rook, because I'll just capture your queen. So the way you would have to play is, and again, right after queen captures, you don't even have to capture the queen and go into a drawn endgame. You have this beautiful idea. So, okay, rook to e8 with a check, king goes to f7, but now queen to e7 with a check, the only square available for a king, king to g6, and now rook captures on d8. So you could go for a tricky line like this and just repeat rook to e6, rook to e7, and just see if your opponent makes a mistake. But I'm sure Vidit just has way too much respect for someone like Levon. And Instead, he played a5. So it is good though, right? That we're evaluating, and since this is an in-depth analysis video, we have evaluated both of these ideas. And a5 is a really good move because you're just blocking any influence along this diagonal especially. And you have just spent one additional move getting your pawn further up. So this is really good. Okay, so after a5, you have f5, attacking the queen from Levon, and now queen to e6 with the check. With it is basically just saying that, hey, look, I'm okay with the draw here because I can only have two end results in this out of this game. Either I'm going to win this game or I'm going to draw this game. There's no way I can lose this game. So by getting the queens off the board, let's go ahead and go into an end game. I have a far superior position, and I'm sure I trust my ability, I trust my talent, I trust my training that I can go ahead and go through a superior end game. Okay, after queen to e6 with the check, you get queen captures on e6, d captures on e6, and after this move, Vidit has 5 minutes 23 seconds and Aronian has 9 minutes and 19 seconds on the clock. So even though there is a difference of 4 minutes, 5.5 minutes, 9.5 minutes, you're perfectly fine in an end game, especially with the 10-second increments that you're getting. So Aronian plays rook to d1 with a check, and this is a slightly imprecise move. In principle, you understand why that move is played. The reason why you want to play that move is, again, you don't want to allow white to get behind the pawn. But by playing rook to d1 with a check, you have basically just given one free move. This king was totally inactive. If white had to activate that king, it would have had to waste a move, either going here or going here. But by giving check, you have essentially given your opponent a free move and king to h8. What could have been the best continuation? After d captures on e6, the best continuation would have been rook to d6, attacking the pawn, and like we said, now you go into a capture fest. Meaning capture fest. I'll take your pawn, you can take my pawn. But now rook to b6. Of course you can't capture, because if you capture, I'll just capture here, and this will be a runner right there. There's no way you're going to catch up to me, and you'll get checkmated really quick. So after rook to b6, you'll have to play rook to e4, and this is a good understanding of chess basics or even slightly advanced ideas, right? So according to the endgame theory, right now, this rook is doing an excellent job of controlling, handicapping the opponent's king. You want to go ahead and do exactly the same thing. You want to go ahead and handicap your opponent's king. And then, again, the position slightly favors white, but this would be a hard drawn endgame. Or hard theoretical win. But this wouldn't be easy by any means, especially when you're playing a rapid game. So that should have been the best continuation, right? But after d captures on e6, Aronian played rook to d1 with a check and allowed a free tempo, allowed essentially a free move, king to h2. Rook to e1, making sure that you get behind the pawn, and now king to g3, right? You just allowed this king to get activated. And rook to e4. So I said h6 was an imprecise move. Rook to d1 with a check was an imprecise move. Rook to e4 was just a terrible move, right? The idea that you want to have here after king to g3 is, actually feel free to pause the video and see what would be the best continuation for black? Again, there is no way you're winning this game. So the way you have to think about now is, how can I get a draw here? And like we said, basic understanding of positional advantage is extremely critical here. So see what you would have played here. Okay, so the move that you had to find, and for everyone that found this move, congratulations, you are an excellent endgame tactician. 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 Okay, so the move that you had to find was g5. Now, look at all the squares that are being controlled. There's no way this king is getting involved in the game whatsoever. Like we said, in the end game, you want to free your king, you want to partner it up with your rook, and you want to push your pawn. In this case, you have 3-1 advantage, and by pushing your pawns, you have done exactly just that. So how would the game have continued? Well, after g5, the only good continuation now is king to f3, you're not in a hurry to capture the pawn. But now king to f8, and to activate your king, rook captures on b7, rook captures on d6, rook to b6, again, offering up, hey, do you want to go ahead and exchange your rooks? But of course you don't. And rook to e4. And you would have enjoyed this game quite a bit. By enjoyed, I mean a long drawn out game. There's no way for you to win. Just absolutely no way. So, but at least you would have gotten a nice drawn position instead of losing this position. But instead, by playing rook to e4, you allowed your opponent to go for rook captures on b7, rook captures on e6, and king to f4. That's essentially a free move, right? If your g pawn was there, there is no way g5 pawn. There is no way the king would be able to enter anywhere here. So again, slightly imprecise play, especially from Levon Aronian in the end game here. Okay, so after king to f4, beautiful play by Vidit, right? Like understanding of the positioning, understanding that, okay, I need to get my king along the, making sure that my king is involved as well as my rook, because my opponent's king is just in such a sad position. Okay, so you get g6, have to play g6, defend the pawn, and now king to f3. Here, I thought the best continuation for Vidit should have been just to keep attacking, right? What do I mean by that? Go for g4 and see if you can break the 3-2 advantage. And by playing g4, you are forcing black to capture. So you get f captures on g4, you get rook to b6, again asking, hey, can we go ahead and start exchanging? But of course you can't. And now black is left with two ideas. Hey, do I go into a passive position and stay on the 7th rank, or do I go for some active ideas and just harass the king, the white king, from the back rank, so the first rank? So let's say if you get rook to e1, you get 8 captures on g4, and the game continues. This would be totally winning for white, right? Because you can give me as many checks as you want, but these pawns are just falling, and I can easily get my queen behind my rook and just start pushing the monster pawns that I have. So that should have been the idea, and instead of going for a slightly passive play after going for a passive play like king to f3, he should have easily just gone for g4 and gone for a forcing line. just opened up just bust open the king side, especially since you have completely handicapped the opponent's king, the black's king, from even entering the 7th freaking rank. Okay, so black goes for king to f8. Again, should have gone for g5, like we have already shown you. This g5 would have been amazing. It's not winning you the game, but it's at least getting you towards a drawn position. And Vidit does not find king to f4. He still goes for rook to b6, which is not a bad idea. He's going for a safer idea, which makes a lot of sense. So rook to b6, you have rook to e4, rook captures on e6. Here you could certainly go for the other side, right? Like, hey, I know I already have a 2-to-1 advantage on the queen side. Let me go ahead and bust open your the king side. So you could certainly go for rook captures on g6, and now you have two ideas, right? One is, if you play h5, then I can just come back here, give you a check, and just pick up the pawn on f5, and I can of course just pick up the a6 pawn. The other idea would be, if you go for my pawn on b4, I'll of course capture, I'll come back, give you a check, and then pick up this pawn as well. And if you try to guard this pawn, no worries whatsoever. I'll go ahead and go for your other pawn. So it would have been slightly better that, hey, you want to go ahead and just break up the pawns into a single pawn structure rather than a combined pawn structure. Just basic chemistry, I suppose. Okay, but instead Vidit goes for rook captures on a6, rook captures on b4, and now you are still breaking up that structure. So you get rook captures on g6, rook to b5, but of course you can't do both things. You can't defend your pawn and attack my pawn. Why? a6, truth hurts. Okay, so h5, you have king to f4, king to f7, and now just rook to c6. Now you are saying that, hey, you're not getting ahead of the 6th rank. Not if you want to go ahead and start chasing me. Or okay, so rook to c6, you have h4, and king to g5. Beautiful, beautiful play by Vidit. He's playing on both sides of the board, right? He's saying that there's no way, while I'm handicapping you from even entering the 6th rank, your poor rook cannot keep an eye on the A file as well as the F file or the H file. So beautiful play by Vidit, just a beautiful understanding of the end game. You get rook to b2, you have king captures on f5, rook to f2 with a check, just going for some sort of harassment, but it's not going to work. King to g4. Here, I thought after rook captures, rook to f2 with a check, Vidit could have certainly gone for this idea, right? Just hide behind the rook and just go ahead and queen your a pawn. It is far too advanced, and there aren't enough moves for black to capture, go back, capture, and then promote, right? I can always just bring my rook back. So a more precise play would have been to get your king from g4 to e5 and go for this idea. But like we said, he doesn't want to calculate all that crazy stuff. He's like, you know what, I'll simplify the game as much as possible. I don't care if I win by a rook or two rooks, right? Or if I win by a rook and a queen. A win is a win. So makes sense. Okay, so he goes for king to g4. Now you have rook captures on g2 with a check, king captures on h4 with a check, rook to g1, king to h5, rook to g3 going after the pawn, but now h4. you have king to g7, rook to c7 with a check, king to f6, it's too late anyways, and now a7. You're looking to get your queen right there on the next move. So of course you have to play rook to a3, just blocking any advancement, but now king to g4. I thought here you could have kept playing on both sides, right? What do I mean? What do I mean by that? Well, king to h6, you get rook to a4, you get h5, so forth, so on, right? If you get rook to a6, you can just play b. You can just bring your rook to the b file or d file and then continue. So this is a known endgame theory. I'm not showing anything new. So you could have certainly just kept playing on both sides, and there's no way for black to stop both threats. But again, Vidit just says after rook to a3, you know what? You can go ahead and capture my pawn on the h4 square. I'll go ahead and get my king all the way over here, and then there's no way you can stop me from entering the game because you wouldn't have enough moves left. So king to g4, you get rook to e4 with a check, king to f3, king to g6. You think you're temporarily blocking the king from entering the fourth rank, but that's going to change pretty soon. So of course you get king to e3, king to h5, king to d3, and now of course you have to bring your rook back because you have to stay on the a file. So king to d4, king captures on h4, king to c5, king to g5, king to b6, king to f6, king to b7, rook to b1 with a check, final attempt, last crazy attempt. But now king to c8. And it was as of move 66 that Levon Aronian resigned the game. Why did he resign the game? Well, he doesn't have anything left, right? You have to get your rook back to the a file, because if you don't, the next move is just going to be a promotion and your king isn't fast enough to get involved in the game. So you get king to b8, rook to b1 with the check, but now I just go ahead and block with my rook. And the truth hurts, right? You have no continuation whatsoever. Either you can capture the rook, or I'll go ahead and get a queen. So when you go back, you can capture my queen, but now I can just capture with my king, and this is completely winning. A rook and king endgame against a king. Any 5-year-old knows how to checkmate. Okay, so that's all the time we have for very much for staying on board, supporting us, and please like the video, like, comment, subscribe, and share the video with as many people as possible. We are doing this for the COVID-19 relief efforts to the individuals who need our help, who are going through either in the healthcare industry or just going through economic struggles. So please, at the very least, if you yourself are going through economic hardships and cannot donate through PayPal or the Venmo ID that's available in the description box, that's okay. Just help us grow, and whatever money we make through your viewership, your support, your support in growing us, it will 100% go to the COVID-19 relief efforts. So please stay tuned for our next video, and the two videos, the part 1 and part 2. This video was absolutely in support of the one and only Vidit Gujrathi, the second best chess player in India, and hopefully we were able to successfully provide some feedback, to some pushback to the just absolutely mean-spirited and unfair criticism that he has received from his performance in this tournament. And we hope that you keep being the amazing person that you are, and the fact that you're only 25 years old. Hope you can represent India for many decades to come, just like the great Vishwanathan Anand is doing still at the age of 50. And hopefully you can find the right support and right sponsorship so you can help yourself grow and keep providing the support to keep being an amazing brand ambassador to the blind chess. So thank you very much. Hope you have a good night, and that's all the time we have for today. Thank you.